Welcome to Session 3 of the 2020 Autism Hope Summit. This hour's presentation is titled Twice-exceptional Learners on the Spectrum, Perspectives from an Educator and Parent, and is presented by Dr. Ashley Carpenter, Clinical Assistant Professor and Director at the College of William & Mary. I'm going to introduce Ashley and then turn it over to her for the presentation. Ashley Carpenter earned her PhD in Education and Teaching of the Gifted and Talented at the University of Connecticut. She is currently a Clinical Assistant Professor and Director of Professional Development and Publications at William & Mary Center for Gifted Education. As the Director, Ashley coordinates several conferences, including 2E at William & Mary, Twice-exceptional Conference, and the National Curriculum Networking Conference. She was also a middle school science teacher for 14 years and is the parent of a twice-exceptional child diagnosed with ASD and ADHD. Thank you for joining us today, Ashley.
Good afternoon. All right, let me share my screen. I'm very happy to be here. Good afternoon. Again, as they mentioned, I'm Dr. Ashley Carpenter, and I currently work at the Center for Gifted Education at William & Mary. And today I'm going to be talking about the topic of twice-exceptional learners. Before I dive in, I think it's really important that you know a little bit about me. So I started as a teacher in Pinellas County, Florida, which is this little map down here. It actually just got hit by Eda, but I was a teacher. I started teaching special education. I've also taught in a mainstream classroom. And then eventually I started teaching in the center magnet for gifted education. And when I started, I had no idea what gifted education was, but was trained and then had some students that really, no matter what we did, of best practices in gifted education were not being successful. So I went on to get my PhD from University of Connecticut at the Renzulli Center. Within that time, I had a child. This is Wyatt. He is my very special little boy. And Wyatt has given me more of an education on how to be an educator than any schooling that I could have ever gone to. So Wyatt was born, he's 9 right now, so he was born in 2011. And he started talking very early, had an incredible vocabulary to the point where you have a little baby who's less than 1 saying multiple words, and he would just turn heads. And he was inquisitive, continued to have advanced verbal ability, but then we started to have some issues. We started to have some issues with Wyatt where he was having behavior problems, being violent, aggressive, having meltdowns, almost getting kicked out of his preschool. At the point where we sought help in finding a psychologist. And the psychologist at first started, they diagnosed him with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. But then as time went on, Wyatt was really experiencing more regulatory, issues, having a lot of sensory issues, not picking up on cues, not being able to follow directions. But again, had an extremely advanced vocabulary, could understand and learn very quickly, could understand things, advanced concepts beyond his grade levels, always scored in the above grade level range, but really couldn't regulate. And those were some of the issues we were having, especially at home. We were having a lot more issues at home than he was in school, and eventually led us to going for more evaluations. And he, at 6 years old, he added the obsessive compulsive disorder tag, and then at 7 got a ASD diagnosis. So Wyatt is really my firsthand experience with what it's like to have a twice exceptional child. So that would be both gifted and having a disability, but also me as an educator, this is my area of specialty and interest, and what I pride myself on teaching others about, because it's not well known. So today we're talking about twice exceptional learners and what a twice exceptional learner is. Now, this is not a medical diagnosis. This is a term that we use in the education field. And the twice exceptional comes from that they don't have one exceptionality as though if they were needing special education services, but they have two. So they have some sort of strength. In the gifted world, we call it gifted. In gifted education, it could be gifted, it could be talented, it could have gifts and talents depending on where you live. But also they have some complex challenges related to a disability of some sort. And that together means that they need services on both ends of that educational spectrum. So if you think about the middle as in general education, sitting in a regular classroom, getting the curriculum and instruction that everybody gets, that would be the middle. These students really need something more than the general education because they have strengths and gifts, but they also need something to support their disabilities or their challenges. So that would fall under the 504 or special education sector. So that's why we call them twice exceptional learners. Now, don't go to a doctor and use the term, or don't go to a psychologist even sometimes and use the term, because gifted is not a clinical diagnosis. So this is really a term that is used in education and educational psychology. So the definition of a twice exceptional learner is students who demonstrate the potential for high achievement or creative productivity in one or more of those domains. So that could be math, science, technology, the social arts, visual spatial, performing arts, any area of human productivity. And they manifest one or more disability as defined by the criteria. So that would be under the Individuals with Disability in Education Act. And these disabilities and high abilities combine to produce a unique population of students who may fail to demonstrate either the high academic performance or their specific disability. And we call this masking. So these students their abilities can mask their disabilities, making it appear as though they are an average student, or their disability can mask their gifts or abilities, meaning that sometimes they are not identified as eligible for the gifted program, but they also can miss out on a designation for special education because they are at or above grade level. So the disabilities and the high abilities, they combine again, and they produce something that is very unique and that we feel needs to be looked at from both perspectives. They need both. So these disabilities, again, it could have to be dyslexia, dysgraphia, speech language disorders. Autism spectrum disorder falls under that IDEA category, but also other health impairments could include ADHD, obsessive compulsive, bipolar, depression, things like that. So educational services must identify and serve both of these, both of the exceptionalities. So what these students need to really be successful is they need high achievement potential services. So that could be being in the pull-out gifted classroom. It could be AP classes. It could be dual enrollment classes. It could be acceleration. It could be enrichment. And they need services for their academic and or social emotional struggles. Because really, to be successful in the classroom, these things really need to be supported and or helped. So what these things look like is they need differentiated instruction for their ability level. They need curriculum and instruction, accommodations and modifications so that they can be able to really show what they can do. They need direct services. My son currently has a pull-out service for writing instruction, one-on-one special education writing instruction, but he also has a pull-out gifted service for critical and creative thinking, and because he doesn't need to be in there when they're doing remediation for math because he really does well in math. They need specialized instruction. They need acceleration options. So maybe going into a grade level early or being able to do those high school into college courses. And they need opportunities to develop whatever their talent is. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over some specific things that relate to gifted education in case you are not familiar with what are the options and what are your rights within gifted education. And then what are the things specific in special education or in the classroom that are really can be helpful to these students so that they can shine and show their full potential. So the things that are important with gifted education is to become more knowledgeable, whether you're a teacher in a school or you're a parent of a child. It's really important for you to understand what gifted education looks like where you are, because it is so different no matter where you go. We have lived in Florida, we have lived in Connecticut, and we've lived in Virginia within the last 9 years. And my son's designation in both the gifted world and the special ed world changed depending on what state we live in. You really need to know why 2E identification is different than a neurotypical child, and knowing what to ask for is important. So the first thing that's important to understand is that gifted services vary by state. Every state has its own definition of gifted learners or gifted and talented learners. They also have their own identification criteria. And then when you go down to the division or district, they also have their own definition and identification criteria. Virginia, actually, each division has their own gifted local plan. And so it really depends on what division you live in. Then, depending on the school, some schools have a gifted magnet program where students are in that environment all the time, just like some schools would have an autism separate classroom, right? Some schools have it, some don't. Some have a pull-out program where they have services only maybe 1 day a week all day or 3 days a week for 1 hour. And then some schools don't offer anything as a special program, but they offer differentiation or maybe an enrichment cluster or a gifted competition club. And then by teacher. So even if you are in the same state, the same division, the same school, teachers and how they offer services for advanced learners is very different depending on the teacher. So in the state of Virginia, so I am in Williamsburg right now, so I thought this was, something of Virginia, is the definition is gifted students means those students in public elementary, middle, secondary, beginning with kindergarten through 12th who demonstrate high levels of accomplishment or show potential for high levels of accomplishment when compared to others of the same age, experience, or environment. Their aptitudes and potential for accomplishment are so outstanding that they require special programs to meet those educational needs. And they have to be identified from professionally qualified persons with multiple criteria in one of the following areas. So in the state of Virginia, a student can qualify for gifted education in general intellectual aptitude, which means that they demonstrate persistent intellectual curiosity, superior reasoning, advanced use of language, exceptional problem solving, rapid acquisition and mastery of facts and concepts. They're creative, they're imaginative, compared to their age level peers. And then we also have specific academic aptitude, which means that this can be just in a subject area, such as English, history, social sciences, math, or science. And then career and technical aptitude, so this would be in a career or technical field. And then performing arts, so visual or performing arts. But just, as an example, every division is different. So I work with the city of Virginia Beach, and they have a school that does the performing arts with theater and music and art. But then I live in Williamsburg, and Williamsburg, James City County doesn't offer that. They only identify with general intellectual ability or some of the subject areas. So it's really important that you research where you live to find out what is offered in that division. So every division is different. Start with the division website and look for gifted education. Sometimes it's things like advanced academics, or it can be under gifted and talented education. I know it's called visions here. Some of them have their own little acronyms, but every single division in the state of Virginia has a gifted local plan. So you should be able to look that up. You can search the school website and also look to see if you search gifted to see if there's a gifted teacher, you can call the gifted teacher at your school. You can also ask the principal. If you feel like your child, or if you feel like your student in your classroom needs something more than the general education curriculum is providing, you can go ahead and search that out. And if you're a parent, you can always ask other parents in the area as to what is offered. So there's some things to really understand when we're talking about gifted services identification. There's a common misconception with educators that you cannot be gifted and have a disability at the same time, and that is incredibly incorrect. So sometimes when we're talking about gifted education, the first step is a teacher recommendation. And if a teacher just has this inherent misconception that if a child has ASD, they can't possibly do or be good at or succeed in a gifted service, that means that they just might overlook them and might not recommend them for gifted services, even if they need that or are capable of doing that. So again, twice exceptional students' gifts can mask their disability, meaning that the students' overall intellect might really make it so that their disability is not quite as apparent, or their disability can mask their ability. So the research has shown that students with ASD have slower processing. So that slower processing might mean that they don't get to finish things on tests or on these cognitive assessments, or maybe they get flustered and they don't finish, or they have their stress levels up so they don't do as well on their test. So that's what the masking effect can be. So how a lot of districts or divisions qualify a student for gifted services is through cognitive assessments, teacher recommendations, classroom grades, and this whole needs for programming or needs for services. So on a cognitive assessment, some of districts or divisions give a school-wide in first or second or third grade. It's called a universal screening, and you might know about it, that all the students are given this test at the same time or in the same grade level. One of the problems with that is they tend to use a student's full scale score instead of the subtests. So students on the spectrum have a tendency to have low working memory and slower processing speed, which means that they're going to score lower on these full scale scores than their ability. And what that means is there's a difference between their ability and their disability is pulling them down in the subtests, and it's called a discrepancy. So actually in educational psychology, if we see a discrepancy between subtests on a cognitive assessment, so an IQ test, if you're seeing a really, really high verbal score, but really, really low working memory or really, really low slow processing speed, that actually is a clue that there is some sort of disability. And if the district takes all those scores and averages them or composites a full scale score, it'll often leave the student right out of range to qualify for that gifted program. So there's many, many things in the research that recommend that you can use the subtest. So only using that verbal subtest and not using that working memory and processing speed because the student has a disability. And that can qualify them for that gifted program, as long as that gifted coordinator or the gifted committee understands that this is a twice exceptional student. Again, I already talked about teacher recommendations. If the teacher is asked, please recommend students you feel need gifted services, they might overlook, or you as a teacher might not think of the student that's on the spectrum as needing gifted services. Classroom grades. I know my child at one point, he was just overwhelmed with everything. It was our first to second grade year, and all of a sudden writing started to become something that was overtaking the classroom, right? In first grade, they can color, they can draw, they can say things, but in second grade, it seems like writing is all over the place and he struggles with writing. So he was overwhelmed, he was frustrated, he was fixated on every letter looking exactly the way it's supposed to look and couldn't get anything done. So his classroom grades were plummeting, and then he would have meltdowns, he wouldn't do anything for a whole day. So if you're having some behavior challenges that are impacting classroom grades, that might make it so that that person, that student, doesn't qualify under those rules. So those are things to talk about. Is the classroom grades really a true representation of the ability? And then the whole need for programming. Again, this is very subjective. It's just important that educators understand that a child who is twice exceptional needs programming on both sides. They need accommodations and they also need the advanced curriculum. So here's one of the things I just wanted to make sure everybody understands is that some students who are both gifted and are on the spectrum, sometimes they have a hard time being identified for special education because they score too high, actually. Part of the problem here is they score too low to have gifted services and they score too high to have special education services, and what they really need is both. So one method is, I mentioned before, that ability and achievement discrepancy. If a student has an above average to superior ability on an IQ test, but they're not achieving at that level, that discrepancy can be used to qualify them for special education services. So we always recommend that if there's a student that you think needs both services, that a comprehensive assessment is done, so that you can really figure out what's going on. So just some methods for identification. If you are a parent, you have the right to ask for a comprehensive assessment. That's one of your rights under special education law. If you're a teacher and you feel like there's a student that is not getting what they need, you can also tell the parent that they have a right to ask for a comprehensive assessment. And you can request a gifted education specialist be included in your IEP or 504 meeting, or to plan interventions that involve a 2E student. And you can provide information for teachers and other staff on the nature of those performance patterns of twice exceptional students. So if I'm telling you something that you don't think your school knows, please tell them. This is a population that not a lot of people know about, and they often go underserved and overlooked in the classroom as just poorly performing students, until we figure out really what's going on. And if we serve both of the things that need serving, then we can have a successful student. Okay, one of the recommendations that's really, really important with these students is to have a really firm alliance between the home and the classroom. That was one thing that saved me, is being able to talk to the teachers to talk to me. My son was having meltdowns right after lunchtime, and we ended up figuring out that he had an applesauce, the ones with the little cap, and he liked the cap and he wanted to keep the cap, and the teacher was just cleaning up from lunch, but she threw the cap away. And then all of a sudden Wyatt's having a meltdown, right? So that communication of figuring out those little triggers, what to avoid, what to look for, what the student is really good at, what they want more of, what is interesting to them, what is their current fixation. My son, it's all penguins. So when he was having a really hard time with writing and he didn't want to do this worksheet, one of his teachers, she knew that the penguin was anything with the penguin, he automatically lights up, that she would just put a penguin stamp on his paper. And if it had a penguin stamp, that just made it more likely that he was going to do it, right? So ally with the teacher or with the parents, talk about your concerns, listen to what each other has to say, listen to what the teachers observed about your child. Teachers, listen to the parent. They're the expert on their child. They're with them all the time. Talk to each other about what you think is best Make sure you have open conversations about strengths and problems. Talk about experimental ideas on trying things. Sometimes it really is just trial and error in the classroom. Negotiate to find the appropriate adult and peer role models. So, maybe they need to be hooked up with another student, or maybe they need an assistant to come in, consider alternatives, and extend possibilities patiently. So I think the best thing is to have a really good relationship between parent and teacher. So when we're talking about programming, again, some programming can be you're in the gifted program, here's what it is, right? Or you're not in the gifted program. There's actually a lot in between. It's not an all or nothing. It's not either you're in the gifted magnet or you're not. There's a lot of things that regular education classroom teachers can do to serve our gifted students in the classroom. And these are things like differentiation. That means that not every kid gets the same thing. They're getting it based on their different level, right? Critical and creative thinking skills, above grade level curriculum, depth and complexity, real world problem solving, some choices in self-directed learning. So being able to do some projects that are in their area of interest. And then again, student choice and interest and challenge. So if we have a student that is not interested and not challenged, they tune out. So you can ask for things, or teachers, you can just start doing them. So as a parent, you can ask for pretesting. Pretesting is a great way to find out exactly what your child knows, especially in their area of strength. This means that if they're, ahead in math and they take a pretest on this math section and they pass the pretest, that means that the teacher can exempt them from that section and have them doing things in their interest area, or going, above and beyond and going to the next section. This is called curriculum compacting. So curriculum compacting, again, it removes that previously mastered material, and it allows for times for doing activities that are going to engage the student. Maybe they're doing a passion project on penguins. Maybe they're building a bridge and doing an engineering project. Maybe they're getting involved in a competition in their area of strength. So it would look like if one student, they didn't master the test, they had direct instruction, then they had their activity 1 and they practiced, and then they practiced more, and then they reteach, and they have a post-assessment. A student 2 that was having a compacted unit would have a pretest where they showed they mastered it, right? They might have a little bit of direct instruction on something that they didn't quite know, maybe new vocabulary, maybe some reduced practice problems, and then they might have a choice of some of the things that I had mentioned before. Another gifted education strategy is acceleration. And acceleration could mean that they're either going at a faster pace than typical, or they're skipping an entire thing. So some of it is early entrance to kindergarten, or skipping a grade. It could be subject acceleration, which means that they're in a 4th grade classroom, but they go to the 5th grade teacher for math time. AP classes or advanced placement classes in high school are an example of acceleration, and also dual enrollment classes are an example of acceleration. So in our middle school magnet, we accelerated our gifted students. They didn't take 6th grade math, they took 7th grade advanced math, and then they went into Algebra 1 in 7th grade, and then they were in geometry, which is a high school class, in 8th grade. And so that they were already 2 years ahead by the time they got to high school in math. Another gifted strategy you can ask for if you're a parent, or you can ask for if you're a teacher, is grouping. And this means that you are ability grouping and having a group of children that have the same academic ability together in a classroom, so that it's easier to differentiate for them. And then enrichment. Enrichment is always just an activity that goes beyond the regular curriculum. If a student really understands something in science really quickly, like they already know a lot about the solar system, you could having them do a project on their own experiment. They could do something on black holes, anything that is within the realm of that unit that is really interesting to that student. The best practice we always recommend is strength-based. In education, we have a tendency to focus on deficits. and focusing on deficits. While it's important to have accommodations for students who need accommodations, those are very important. And it's really important to have direct services like occupational therapy and speech therapy and one-on-one assistance sometimes. What really pushes these students into their area of strength and gives them joy is focusing on what they like to do and what they're good at. So we really need to focus on that. So one way to do it is to survey your child or survey your students, find out what they're interested in. What are their strengths? What learning mode do they prefer? What product do they prefer? So would they rather watch a video? Would they rather do an art project? Would they rather create a blog or a song? What's going to give them that spark to get them over that hump of their disability causes angst? So one of our things that we always do with our son, he's having a hard time, especially with writing. He's having a hard time being in front of the screen so much, is that when he's done with his work, he gets to do his video games. So that's our little carrot, right? And then one of his areas of interest is penguins. So anything we can connect to that helps us through. It's always important that you can add a choice of products, right? Most assignments are writing intensive, and students have trouble with writing. So you can always create it where they could do an art project or a video or a song instead. Some different types of enrichment. This is just based on the enrichment triad model. Is type 1 is just general exploratory activities. So if our student already understands the material, you can give them lots of videos what they can watch on things of interest to them. There are live zoo feeds, there's virtual field trips, there's Ask an Expert, right? There's tutorials on how to fly a drone. There's all sorts of things that can count as enrichment and that are free and available online now. Type 2 would be group training activities. That would be learning a skill. So learning how to edit a video, learning how to make your own blog, learning how to write your own book, learning how to get published. And then type 3 activities would be a real world problem solving. So any of those action things, like students are feeling like there's too much plastic being used, right? So that they're going to want to reduce the amount of plastic in a school. So it's all that's self-guided for them to go and interview people at the school, look up how to reduce plastic, come up with a plan. And they can do these in little groups, or the teacher can help them go through those themselves. One example, my son's teachers had, he was excelling in math. So on the day of the week where they would have some math remediation. He didn't need that. There were a few other kids within his class that also didn't need it. So the enrichment teacher would pull them, and they were doing a project on their own. My son was really interested in volcanoes and rocks at that point. So he created a board game on the rocks and the volcanoes, and he loved doing it. It was in his interest area. She accommodated for him not having to write. So, he would watch videos and read books, and then, he would tell her what to write, and she would write down the notes or the cards before he could type. This was when he was in like 2nd grade, but right. So we're using their strength to guide the instruction. And another thing is you can ask for, or if you're a teacher, start an academic competition in your school. There are hundreds of academic competitions that are already out there. They already have the rules, they have the timelines, they already have everything up there. You just need to find one that students are interested in, and then you can act as a coach, or even parents. You can act as a volunteer coach, really easy through Zoom now. They could have a club, they could have an enrichment cluster, which means that some schools have a period of the day where it's either for extra help or looking for enrichment opportunities. There are things like Destination Imagination. Future City is one that we used to do. It's an engineering one for middle schoolers, where The students have to have a specific problem within a city in the future, and they have to invent a solution. They have to also design a city, a 3D model of a city. They have to write an essay of their solution. They have to present it, and they have to do some stuff on SimCity, which is a video game. So there's Global Math Challenge, there's Math Olympiad, there's National History Day, there's Odyssey of the Minds, there's Science Olympiad. So there's a whole bunch of different competitions that students can get involved in. Here is a site. It is at Johns Hopkins University, has a whole list of academic competitions. It's the Center for Talented Youth at Johns Hopkins University, and they have a whole bunch of resources. All right, so in special education, one thing that I have learned is that a medical diagnosis is different than an educational eligibility for services. So what I learned early on is that just because my child was diagnosed with ADHD does not mean that he was found eligible for services. It was a long journey for us. Our child always scored above grade level in every single thing that he did except for writing. And in the beginning, the writing was, they weren't as worried about the writing because they're like, well, you know, it's still within, kids are still learning this, and, you know, second graders still reverse their letters, and it didn't really become a problem until third grade, where they were willing to say, yeah, he's very behind, even though I had been saying it since kindergarten. So I had been fighting for services since he was in kindergarten. We started with a 504 plan based on ADHD, right? So I could not get a writing service until we got our autism spectrum disorder diagnosis. But that diagnosis from medical professionals did not get us services at school because he scored too high. He scored too high up on above grade level. They had to do their own evaluations. And eventually the ADOS is what got us services for him based on his disability and getting him an IEP. Just understand that autism spectrum disorder often comes with coexisting conditions. So the student can be on the spectrum, but also have ADHD, also have oppositional defiant disorder, often have anxiety, obsessive compulsive. They can be gifted. They can have auditory processing. They can have depression. They can have dysgraphia or dyslexia and also be on the spectrum. So just understand that things are a lot more complicated for educational eligibility. If you feel like a student needs more than they're getting on the special education side, same thing. Put it in writing to an administrator, a teacher, counselor, the special education teacher, and the gifted teacher, and really say what your concerns are. You can even say, I know my son is on grade level. However, his stress level, you know, is beyond what it should be, right? He's having meltdowns when he gets home because he's so stressed out, or he's biting his shirt. My son chews on his shirt. He actually chews holes through his shirt when he gets anxious about things, right? We were having school refusal where he didn't want to go to school because he felt like everybody was mad at him all the time. So these are some things that you can say that can get you into that, you know, eligibility meeting for special education services. Provide documentation of all of the diagnoses that you already have or the evaluations from private people. You can always request a full evaluation from the school as well on areas that you feel that they need to be eligible for services. Oh, there we go. Just to let you know that you do have rights. A school cannot tell you that that your child or your school cannot tell you that your student doesn't qualify for special education services because they're not below grade level or they've not failed. So here are a couple different quotes that it just says that each state must ensure a free and appropriate education is available to any child with a disability who needs special education and related services, even though the child has not failed. Same thing, it's the state has an obligation to make free and appropriate education available to a child with a disability, even if that child meets the state's academic achievement standards. So just understand the rights and the special considerations when you have a child that is gifted and has a disability. So So accommodations are so incredibly important for helping these children to be comfortable in the classroom and be successful and show their true abilities. Some things that you can add that you might not realize are allow understanding to be demonstrated in different ways. So including verbal answers or dictating things. We want to make sure that the disability is not masking that ability. Reducing the number of problems needed to show mastery. So if you're a child or if a student in your classroom, if you know that they're really, really quick at learning math, if they get it, there's no need for them to do those extra problems. It's just causing them more load and more stress, especially if they have a really hard time writing. Ability to use speech to text in assistive technology. That's another accommodation. Provide advance warning for changes in routine or schedule. So I included understood.org is a website that has a lot of different accommodations by disability. And although autism spectrum disorder is not specifically on there, you will have things like attention and writing troubles and sensory processing or auditory processing. And what I think is the most important thing is that not all educators who create these IEPs and these 504 plans, they don't all understand how complex a student on the spectrum is and how different they are. They don't always understand that the loud noises in the hallway or the loud noises in the cafeteria might be creating the dysregulation, right? So how would they know to create an accommodation for that? So it's really important that the parents and the teachers are talking to each other and figuring out what the issues are that are causing dysregulation with the student. So some things that we have found incredibly helpful, at least in our family, is reducing the writing load, meaning we use Google Docs or Google Drive. We use the Google microphone and the Google Talk to Text. So even currently, there's a lot of Google Forms right now that teachers are using. And it's even hard for my son to type. He's 9 years old and he refuses to learn to type, even though he has trouble writing. So we open up a Google Doc, he voice to text the answer, he copies, he pastes it, and it reduces a meltdown for having to type 3 words into a Google form. Reducing the reading load is another thing that can help. There's things like Natural Reader, which is an app that can read a PDF or files to a student. There's also the Kindle Reader. Also, there's Speechify is another one. And then executive function. I know my son has a really hard time with planning, organizing, and keeping track of things. So using the calendar and reminders, we currently are using Alexa to remember all of his Zoom meetings. So you can actually get Alexa to have reminders that you set on your app on your phone, and she will verbally say, reminder, you have a Zoom meeting in 5 minutes. So that's a verbal reminder. It's often very helpful, but calendar reminders, timers also can be helpful, and planners. But you can't just, give it to students and expect them to know how to use it, because a lot of them lack executive functioning skills. So we actually really be diligent in teaching them how to plan and how to organize and how to time or use time wisely and how to prioritize. So it actually has to be something that is a teachable skill. So you actually can I use Passion Planner. It's just because they have some free PDFs. And print it out and then help my son with writing, like, okay, what are we going to do first? Checklists help him a lot. What are we going to do first? What are we going to do next? How do you decide what you should do first and what you should do next? So that's been pretty helpful. I don't know if these things are going to work out come middle school, but I'm trying. One of the other things that is the most important, I believe, this is from Uniquely Human, is staffing choices, of having the correct people working with my son. Barry from Uniquely Human describes it as there's 3 types of people with working with students with disabilities, specifically students on the spectrum. There's the naturals, and those naturals have immediate connection. They can keep the child calm and happy and relaxed. They know how to interact with the child. They have a chemistry, and they just intuitively know. Like, think in your head how some students go into a classroom or are with people and you don't worry, right? Then there's the it-like people, and those people lack this intuitive ability, but they can learn, right? If you teach them the little innuendos and the little quirks, then they can learn. They'll ask for help from parents. They're willing to try new things, and they can take direction. And then there's the itless people. And the itless people, they're not quite able to connect. They often are the source of the dysregulation in a child. They're not open as much to family or the child. They have preconceived notions of what ASD is and what it should look like. These are the people that say your child doesn't look autistic. Focus on discipline and control and everybody following the rules exactly the way it's supposed to be. They don't usually ask why, and they're insensitive to sensory issues. So one of the most important things as a parent and as an educator is making sure that our twice exceptional children with ASD are placed with people that are not itless people, the naturals and the it-like people. Unfortunately, most of the natural people are already in special education, right? That's what they're naturally drawn and they're understanding. Some mainstream on grade level classroom teachers who have been teaching, the same way for a while, can be the cause of dysregulation, especially if it's like an AP course. If your child's taking AP chemistry and this is the way it is, right? And I'm not going to budge. We've had gym before, which every day was dysregulation in gym, right? That's the way our year went. But if you have a choice at the beginning of the year, talking to the principal and having the child placed with people who are naturals or it-like people can make the world of a difference. And you can ask for that. I've often interviewed principals and chose the school when we moved based on the principal, based on, the staff, and then ask the principal to please place my child with people who are, patient, kind, creative problem solvers, and that don't take behavior problems personally when they're sensory related. So these are Wyatt's teachers. They actually both came from Connecticut to speak at my Twice Exceptional Conference in Virginia last year. They're just the most passionate, wonderful people, and I couldn't have gotten through elementary school without them. So teachers make the difference. It's a little meme for you. Special needs parent fell in a hole. Doctor, you keep a diary? Local authority, sorry, we don't have enough money. Charity, here's a form, fill it out. Family member, what hole? Sometimes I get that from my family because they don't understand that my son is incredibly intelligent, but has some extreme struggles. They just think he's making it all up, taking advantage of us. Another special needs parent, I'm here, I know my way down, I've been there before, I know how to get out, and I won't let you do it alone. Teacher, I may not completely understand, but I'm here to help. That's what we need to be as educators, of understanding the struggles of all of our parents. Here's some resources that I just want to share. Let's see. I don't know if it's going to let me do it. Oh, nope. Hold on one. Let's see. Here we go. Now it'll pop up. Maybe not. So we have our Center for Gifted Education. We have a Twice Exceptional Conference in February. I don't know if it's going to let me do it. Let's see. And Shia, can Can we share slides with people?
So we're not sharing slides, but the recordings of all of these presentations will be uploaded on the Autism Drive. So if the links are on here, and they'll be able to view this slide when they're looking at the recording on Drive.
Okay, let's see. All right, I will have to talk about how to figure out how to get to the get to the actual link there, because it doesn't want to do it. Maybe this will help. Nope. Okay. I don't know why it doesn't want to go. All right, so I do have, a few resources. If you go to cfge.wm.edu, we have a 2-week conference in February. Understood.org is one that is very helpful. It even has strategies. There's 2E News is a resource for Twice-exceptional educators. There is a resource guide for parents on Twice-exceptionality. Tilt Parenting Podcast is one that different researchers come on and give tips about different things. And then the Colorado, you can search Colorado 2E resource books. There's 1 and 2, and those are incredibly helpful for educators. They actually have a plan that they actually have a guide on how to work with students, and a plan where you can look at student strengths, look at student struggles, and look at the different options for both their strengths and their struggles. So those are some fantastic resources for you. And I will see if I can find out a way to get everybody what they need on those. Okay. Did we have any questions come in?
Yes, we did. So I'm going to open up for questions now. One participant has asked, resources seem kind of even as young as kindergarten. Can you give more specific examples of support?
You cut out for a second. Could you repeat that for a second?
Yes. Resources seem rather limited for younger twice-exceptional students, even as young as kindergarten. Can you give more specific examples of support?
Yeah, so my kindergarten, Wyatt, my son did not have a 504 plan until 1st grade. And I think it's so important to the teacher is the most important thing, and just working with the principal to get a teacher that is one of those naturals. And then I worked with the teacher incredibly closely. She happened to be a parent of twin ADHD boys, and she was just adding in supports without needing to. So there's teachers out there, I was one of them, that would add in these accommodations for children without a 504 plan or without an IEP, right? If my students needed extra time, they got extra time. If they needed to go to a quiet room to go take a test, they did. If they needed to tell me the answer instead of writing the answer, I did. If they needed to do a different type of assignment, I let them do that. So there's teachers out there that will automatically accommodate. What is important is getting that teacher to write down all those accommodations that he or she is doing that they think will, if they took all those away, that the child would not be successful, and going to a team with that list of 504 plan. That'll help get the ball rolling. And if you don't qualify for an IEP, because I didn't qualify for an IEP until 7 years old, a 504 plan and accommodations, that's the first step that's easier to get. Even if your child has ASD and their ADHD, you can get a 504 plan for ADHD easier than you can get services for some of the larger diagnoses. So that's my recommendation, is just work together and tell them everything they need to know about your kid.
Another participant has asked, what can parents do if their child's school has limited services for gifted students, or if they're having trouble getting their child access to accelerated services that they need?
Yes, I agree. It is hard. There's that list of things to ask for that I went over. You can always ask the teacher, do it in a nice way. Please don't go into the teacher and be like, you need to do this, have a conversation, say, we feel that our child, might need a little bit more challenge. Are you open to, pretesting? So pretesting, I always feel is the best because they can see what the child knows on paper. Like it's there, it's black and white. They can't argue with it. If your kid already knows this math strategy, then they're like, oh yeah, I need to do that. Or asking for, some kids have map testing results. If it's showing at the beginning of the year, they're like, oh yeah, they're above grade level. Say, okay, so what can we do about that? And some ideas are enrichment or acceleration. We started off in Connecticut in a district that did not do gifted services until 3rd grade. Well, we were there K1, 2. Just asking the teacher for, little tweaks is it goes a long way. The other thing is you could start a parent group, parent clubs too, with the teachers. I had one teacher or one parent that I work with who started a math competition club. And as the teacher was more than willing to start it with the kids if the parent would help coach it. So you can do that online. They can be working on their math competition stuff in school while, meeting outside of school with Zoom if you want. But you can always advocate to the principal that they need more gifted services, or they need to look at their identification criteria, that it's not conducive to special education children, that it's leaving them out. The more parents push, usually the more gets done. Next question.
Another participant asked, when we started homeschooling our 2E kid a few years ago after our local school denied our ASD daughter an IEP because she was not behind grade level enough to qualify. What supports exist for 2E kids not in the public school system?
I think there is some legislation or something about that even if they're not in school, that you can qualify, like get services at the school, like go in for occupational therapy. We have here our law school actually works with parents to parent advocate. That's one thing that you might want to look into. If you search William and Mary at the law school, I believe if you look for parent advocates or special education, that there's a way that they can help intervene for you. I don't know that once you remove yourself from the district, if you qualify for those. We personally did outside services. We do occupational therapy. I pay for it. Our health insurance pays for it. We do counseling outside of the school. The only thing our school does is the pull-out writing service and accommodations. So, obviously you're accommodating all the accommodations that would be in a classroom, you're already doing at home. It's just those services that you're looking for. You can always do academic competitions at home. You can always buy curriculum that gifted programs would use. We do curriculum at William and Mary. We have Jacob's Ladder is through Proofrack Press. We have our science units through Proofrack Press as well, that you can do that with them as well. It really focuses on thinking skills. There's a whole bunch of gifted curriculum that you can use. What else? There is enrichment programs. Northwestern Center for Talent Development has enrichment programs online. We have some Saturday enrichment programs at William and Mary as well that are online right now. Yeah, that's what I can think of right this moment.